Data Storytellers, long anticipated episode here. We've been planning this with Eric for, I think, over a year,
Yes,
correct?
it's been a while. Yeah, did a
Yes,
couple
but a lot
events,
happened
other
from it.
conversations, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But we haven't had the recording uh, going while we were having those conversations. I think a lot happened in the past year, from events to new children in the families and all that. But I think now we're here, and I look forward to the conversation. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy
Mm,
to be here. It's been a while, and looking forward to doing it.
absolutely. And today we are going to talk about, well, mainly your playbook when it comes to engaging with the business, especially when it comes to data visualization and much more and beyond, data visualization and beyond. But before we dive in, I always like to start with kind of understanding your context, like where your perspective is coming from. So for those audience members who don't know you, would you mind just giving a short introduction into what you do over at Sunbelt and what your role entails?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the director of data visualization. Sunbelt, we're kind of in between a little bit of a mix of centralized, decentralized for how we have some of our analysts laid out. But Sunbelt Rentals is a construction rental equipment company, but we do a lot more than that. We rent to B2B, we do B2C as well. Anything from an aerator for your yard to a generator to power a hospital if there's an emergency or the power goes out. But at Sunbelt, run largely the data and analytics team, central group of people that really focus on enterprise reporting, help drive the data strategy, and kind of give best practice and guide some of those other analysts and folks in the other departments, and kind of holistically understand a little bit what's going on in the business to provide better insights where we can.
And I always like to zoom in a little bit on, okay, what does the analytics team or the data visualization team, the data team, uh, actually does through the perspective of the end users. And when I say end users, actually we can now go like on the ground in terms of the service that you provide as a company. The customers of Sunbelt, how are they experiencing your work in the data analytics team? So if we could just maybe paint a picture of that end-to-end value stream that could kind of bring it to life to the listeners.
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of what we do, we work hand in hand with our data science team. Right now, we're rolling out some products for our sales reps to better understand cross-sell, upsell. So depth and breadth of products. Not everybody's going to rent from every line of business that we have, from climate control or power HVAC or just general contractor type work. So we work really closely with the sales reps team and ops and marketing to better understand how our equipment is used, who uses it, why they use it, and when, so we can better provide better products at the right time for those folks. A lot of what we do as well, even just sales related, is just understanding our customers so our sales reps can sell better. We look at the analysis from an operational standpoint, from efficiency to what equipment needs to be disposed of. So we operate more at a higher level from, more of a P&L type work. And then the customers ourselves right now, we're working on, external focus stuff on some better reporting via some web portals and things like that for customers to have access. So trying to move away from some .NET things, some old, just SSRS style reports that are real tabular, but giving them some more actionable stuff that they can play around with, do their own analysis without having to export something to an Excel file and kind of live, back in the 90s. It works for a lot of stuff, but, we like to try to drive those insights to, better look at the report and better leverage that from an efficiency and kind of a communication standpoint.
Absolutely. Many of these processes are still stuck in the 90s. Overall, you would be surprised if some of the best and brightest companies in the world still have those legacy processes. But I mean, we live in interesting times right now. Everything is being overhauled. And before we look at your playbook that we've been kind of preparing for this conversation, Maybe just wind the clock back a little bit. And how did you end up in this role? So I don't even know if you and I have discussed this before. I
No,
don't
I don't
think,
know.
but
I think it's an interesting story, but I would just
okay.
kind of
Well, I
leave it
would
up
love to
here.
hear
But
that. That's why we're here.
I grew up in Wisconsin. My dad was a chemical engineer by trade. When he went to school, supposed to go out to oil fields in Saudi Arabia. Ended up working in the paper industry, and got into business. And he's just a whiz Excel, and I just kind of picked that up from him as I grew up along the way, and was interested in that, kind of learn more of the business side from him. But I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison. I was a history major of all things. I wanted to be a teacher. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. It's a very competitive program, but I definitely learned, how to succinctly put forth your idea when you're trying to talk about, a paper you wrote, and just communicate that way. I got a job. Actually, my twin brother worked at a company that was like a spinoff of SC Johnson. He got me the job, and that's an entire another story of confusing people at a workplace when you kind of walk by them and don't say hi, and they get pissed at your brother. Um, they yell at him 15 minutes later. But I got started with them more on, like, we did food safety audits, so it was developing the audit and the questionnaire essentially for our team to go out or customers to leverage on an online tool. We set up some of the data structure on the back end and did some reporting. So I learned pretty quick a bunch of SQL, really just how to understand data, how it's structured, and then kind of leveraged what I learned growing up from my work experience and from my dad for that business side. I got started at Sunbelt working in our business development group, really analyzing some of our M&A work, our market growth, and kind of where we should go from a location standpoint. We were in a really big growth phase and trying to make sure we're doing it the right way. We're capturing market share and doing all that stuff. So I just kind of happened into analytics. I like it. I think it's interesting. I like solving problems. So I have, I think, a different mindset than just like an analyst would, just understanding a lot more code-based driven stuff. But it's kind of all rooted in more business understanding and how to drive outcomes.
Absolutely. And actually your background in history. So that's not the least relevant and least connected to data analytics, right? I mean, there's a reason why people are so fascinated with history, because you can learn so much from what happened in the past and adjust your actions in the present to influence outcomes in the future. So that sounds a lot like data analytics in a corporate environment to me, right?
It's
Understanding what
perfect,
happened.
thinking about KPIs and metrics and lead and lag variables and what do you want to focus on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then how did your role evolve over at Sunbelt? So uh,
Yeah,
how did you end up doing what you do today?
yeah. Over time, again, just started to work with other groups, more so understood our company's data structure. I actually left for a little bit. I had kind of worked my way into some of the machine learning stuff that we were doing with some other groups. Again, more visualizing some of the output that we were doing and communicating with the business. Left for a little bit, but there was an opportunity to come back and run the team. Someone was leaving, was fortunate enough to come back and expand on the role that I'm at now, and it's been a fun journey. We've had some changes internally at the company, just in leadership and kind of where we've decided to put certain things. But recently we've got a acting CFO or CIO, old CFO that our group reports to now, and that is a shift because he kind of handles our sustainability, our fleet, our finance teams. So it's more of a, hey, this is a business function. We're
Hmm.
driving business value. We work with our customers that way. So kind of my team and what we do, more so business focused and kind of communicated that way as well.
That's big, and that's where everything is shifting towards now. When it comes to data and analytics, it's now not about being in that box and doing that kind of. What the business's impression is that data and analytics are kind of like this techie stuff, Often it's grouped together with IT even, but this is now blown out of the water due to the AI hype, right? But I think this is naturally where the entire profession is going. So it sounds like you guys are on the right
Yeah,
track for sure.
yeah,
And
we're trying to be.
and what have you seen as some of the biggest challenges from your perspective when it came to driving results from analytics in the business? And this is where we can actually start kind of mapping out that playbook as well.
Yeah, it's really finding what's relevant and what's important. Everybody has their viewpoint on what they own, how they talk about things, and how they're accountable. Like marrying that up to what's happening at the day-to-day level, what's happening at a middle management level, and what's happening from the top. So it's that battle of top down or bottom up, and especially from an analytics perspective, and we do a lot of the reporting. It's as much of an art form as it is the science, like the actual science behind understanding the data. And I think that's where my team's trying to focus on more, is like that true business understanding to let the business drive some of the technology and the analytics, as opposed to like us kind of forcing some things down that they're just like, hey, you kind of don't know what you're talking about. Like if you had a 5-minute conversation with me, I could have told you that these two things are wrong and we should actually look at it this way. So trying to do that and work in kind of our own insights and where we think there's some opportunities. So it's a give and a take for sure.
I also just realized that I picked up this Rubik's Cube from my desk. It's a Hungarian invention, and we both have Hungarian.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Last names here, and as we're trying to put together the pieces of your playbook, I think it's a great analogy. So absolutely, and then historically, as you encountered those challenges, right? What were your key tools of overcoming them and then elevating the position of data and analytics in the company? Like what were your main strategies?
I think really just like over communicate. Like anytime that you can over communicate and bring in business leaders and try to understand where they're coming from, is the biggest way, and it's to kind of get that credibility. And I think even on top of that, I had my current boss, is just send some examples. Like even just the best way to get credibility is deliver on results. Like that will drive trust. And I think once you kind of get that momentum of, look, we're trying really, really hard to understand your business problem. Here's some other things we can recommend, kind of taking what we understand of what you do. And that's how I communicate to leaders in general. Now, and through the work that I've had, just building those relationships is, okay, I understand you want these two things. Well, what if we did these two? Or you really want this one? And then delivering on that is the best way. I think it's worked for my team to deliver results and build trust and kind of work through those problems. So it's as much of like, all right, we're not going to second guess the data anymore. And I think sometimes that kind of comes up as we're developing queries and tables and things like that we work with the engineering team. It's, all right, let's actually, great, data's good. Let's move on to the insights and actually actioning off of that.
So you participated in a few of our discussions previously, engaging with other leaders in other companies. What have you found to be the key blockers and barriers to trust? So why do you think that the business has this standard posture of maybe not even this distrust, but a lack of trust, right, towards data and analytics functions?
I think trying to break down those barriers of like, I've been in the business for, some of these folks that we work with have been in our industry for 20, 25 years. And they might say, well, hey, I don't want an AI tool to tell me how to do my job, or this insight you drove from this data when I've been doing this for this long. And it's balancing up that true gut check from a business leader to say, hey, the data's actually not telling us that, and understanding like where you can make improvements and building, like, I think to get over that hurdle as well is, all right, let's map this out. And this has worked with us a couple times in the past. We've had some questions on some customer data and they're like, hey, I really don't think that's right. They could say, well, we've looked at the data. Here's our target to go for. Here's the ROI you can get. And if we prove that ROI, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like I got the connection now from what you were trying to do. And it's not as much just like throwing up data on people. It's finding the right spot to go actually make an impact and affect some of those metrics and KPIs that people look at.
Absolutely. And you mentioned relationships and partnerships as the key to being able to deliver amazing results for your clients. So when it comes to building these relationships and building these partnerships and the over communication, what have you seen as the best tools of building those relationships and over communicating? So maybe if we can kind of double click on some of those methods and some of those dynamics, that would paint a great picture for the audience.
Yeah, I think I'm just building the relationships is just sitting down and popping to someone's office for 5 minutes, like putting a face to the name. I'm encouraged that with my team and the folks who work with me is just, hey, you're going to sit in a meeting. This is who this person is. Here's something they've worked on. Let's like hear from them how they talk and kind of how they communicate to you. And like just simple stuff like, hey, do you want to go grab lunch? And just kind of like even just building rapport with people, like really like basic, simple things. I think just it really helps. And like you kind of get lucky enough to have someone to like bring you along, and you try to do that for other people too. Like I had, when I first started, my manager, I was in like every meeting with him, every meeting possible. We walk by the CEO's office and he'd be like, hey, this is this person. And just like those simple things to try to just make that connection. And I think on like the over communication part, I had a mentor kind of like give me this framework of kind of how to, double click on that is, as long as, leadership knows what you're working on, why you're working on it, and what is the impact. And if you're trying to just communicate what that is, it's really hard to get time with those folks, even if you just want to explain it. So say best thing he said is like send like a bi-weekly email on a Friday and said, hey, in a really quick, here's 2 sentences. I might throw some detail on the bottom on some of those things, but like, here's what we did. Here's why we did it. Here was our outcome. And then, so if they want to ask follow-up questions, they can, but he's like, send it to yourself first. He's like, read it on your phone. If you're trying to get like the CEO's or the CIO's attention, like whatever, if he's looking at his phone for 2 seconds, like if you can get that to fit on his phone screen and he doesn't have to scroll, like that was like an approach he used, and I've used it recently. And it's like, hey, I had a couple comments back. Somebody may have looked at the email, but I know it's like distilled down to like say, hey, this is what we're doing. You can now understand this, and if you got questions, kind of come to me.
So this is great, actually, like sending it to yourself. I love that because putting yourself into the other person's shoes, it's the most difficult thing, right? When we talk about emotional intelligence and all that, it really boils down to that. Like, can you entertain the perspective of the other individual? And this is a nice little hack of sending it to yourself, opening up the message, and what is that gut reaction that you have to that? Because you'll see that even your attention is just so brutally selective and dismissive of information, and you ideally are targeting people who are busy, and their success depends on their ability to filter out information. And you're not an exception, right? I'm not an exception either. Like, no one is. I mean, they're not an exception either, right? They send emails to others that need to pass the same test, right? So I love that. And then looking at it through this lens will make you kind of capable of crafting your messaging in a way that they can receive it. And I love that you don't communicate it with the intention of, no, I need to tell them everything possible, but more like giving them some bits and pieces and giving them the opportunity to follow up on that if they want and dive deeper into it, and thus engage then in a real conversation on the back of that.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd say even if you're going to communicate that way, like don't get discouraged. Like you said, people are filtering out information, but don't get discouraged if you don't get a response back. Or like, I think sometimes like in those situations, like silence can kind of be a good thing. Be like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Like you were expecting me. It's not like they're responding back and have 15 questions about what it was. Right. That's probably the bad thing when you're like, all right, now they're coming to me. Now they have all these things. But like, don't get discouraged. Like, you're going to be doing the right thing. And guess what? If they don't want to read it, they want to read it, but you're still putting it out there. And hopefully it's still driving the results and stuff that you want. And then it might lead to that hour conversation that you need or you wanted to get to help maybe say, hey, here's a new process we can put in place, or we got to speak further on this. And you hopefully get that FaceTime then. So.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, the need to get a response, or even how you phrase the questions. I mean, imagine you getting emails and you have to respond to all kinds of requests all the time. And now just there's one more when you're obliged to respond when it might not even be necessary. And now that you're telling me this, I'm noticing that even in our communication strategy, I do this all the time, where sometimes I even explicitly say no need to respond, right? It's not, I'm just providing value here, right? And I'm making myself open to, further engagement, but otherwise it's okay. I'm putting it out there. It's more like the posture of providing a service, which is what you want to achieve. Now, with regards to the communication, in the last session that we had, a group session, one of your colleagues mentioned a framework, which is, I think it was the three R's, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know if
we've kind of stole that from a few other people, but I think it's a good way to talk about analytics, reporting, driving insights, and if you're going to start talking about, framework around KPIs and metrics and variables, and like who's accountable for what and when, like the 3-33 rule. So what in a report can you develop something? And again, this is that kind of ties into, I am now making this connection on that email communication standpoint of what do you want somebody to get out of something in 3 seconds, 30 seconds, or 3 minutes? So, people are busy even looking at dashboards and reports, and, the way our business leaders and a lot of people work is they want all the information. Just give me all the detail. I'll figure it out. I want to export it to Excel. I want to do this. And you're like, no, you guys don't have to do that. we can.
And you shouldn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you shouldn't do that. So again, structuring your report, structuring your analysis to say, if someone's going to look at this in 3 seconds, be like, great, these KPIs are up, this one's down. Who do I need to go talk to? What do I need to do to influence that? Or, all right, this one's down, but here's the reasons why it's down. And then here's a couple detail sections on where I can go make an impact as well. So just that's where that art form comes into play of how do I structure this the right way to say, hey, I'm really going to feed you what you should be looking at. But if you want some of the extra stuff, you can have the extra stuff. And it's like asking that, like, okay, they're going to ask 15 questions about that email you just sent. It's all right, I'm going to ask 15 questions about the data you just provided me. And like, I'll get back to that.
Absolutely. And I love that. It's like 3 seconds, 30 seconds, and 3 minutes. And then it helps you to put everything into perspective. Can you give an example of that? Like in your business context of how would that look like of one of your stakeholders, like pick any, right? Fictional or non-fictional, and a business scenario. Just to bring it to life to the audience.
Yeah. I'll kind of add on to that too. We're trying to get through that concept of like KPIs, metrics, and variables. I think everybody understands that. And there's some stuff I've been reading lately on just the best way to communicate that to your business leaders. KPI is that outcome, more of that lagging indicator. Metric is going to influence that KPI. Those variables are like those day-to-day microtransaction things that you can affect now to hopefully drive change at the week or the month when you're kind of rolling that up. And I think serving up that information to the right person and how you structure that. So in our example, we focus on like delivery cost recovery, call it like margin on delivering equipment. So it's factoring in driver salary. Did we use an outside hauler? What is the stuff that we're getting back? So in that 333 scenario, we have a service manager who's responsible for getting equipment ready and dispatchers to dispatch that equipment. So if we say, hey, at a branch level, these are all the KPIs you should look at. a dispatcher and a service manager arguably don't need to understand like, hey, our margin on all this stuff was 80%, but how many things am I getting through the shop, or what is our on-time delivery rate or pickup rate? Like those are the like things to say like, hey, at your level now, I'm giving you those are the high things to worry about. And the detail on that like 30-second or 3-minute might be, hey, typically these assets take longer to get through the shop, or this truck is down, so like mileage has been affected, or it's delivery time because it has a longer route. So that's kind of just like identifying where and when people should look at that stuff and kind of that top down example.
That's great. And by the way, this is a question even outside of your playbook, but I'm curious. So with everything that's happening in the market with regards to AI and all the hype, you can see sometimes on LinkedIn the post that I don't know what kind of AI solution just destroyed Power BI, or what Tableau is the past now because of whatever new agentic AI solution. Where do you stand on this and your team, and what is your insider perspective on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny, we had somebody in our data science director explaining like AI and ML to a group of people and generative AI, and he's like, look, it's kind of just fancy Google. It just more so gives you the answer that you think you want, as opposed to clicking on links and trying to get there yourself, right? And that's just on the generative side. We're trying to be responsible as well of like, hey, we're not sending stuff out to the web. It's secured, and hopefully getting out of some of those pitfalls from, look, every vendor has that AI solution that they want to sell to you, or there's a new vendor, we have this new capability, and just trying to understand if we're going down that route, what kind of information do we need to send you? What are you sending back to us? Is that even make sense for us to do it? Can we do that in-house? So asking a little bit more like due diligence on some of that, rather than just like jumping and saying, all right, well, now we have 10 AI solutions that don't really work together. They might not need to, but they don't work together and they're just kind of sitting on their own. They might just get some dust on the shelf and somebody might not ever look at it, right? I think really from like the data side, and you talk about like, oh, we have a better solution than Power BI. Like Power BI for a long time has been able to offer stuff that says like, hey, type in a free text question, it'll give you an answer. And this is where like really that like business understanding comes into play, and like a really good, strong semantic model is, if you talk about get nerdy for a second, like really the engineering process between a bronze, silver, and gold layer, and what you want to hit and what is curated where. And if you don't have the business understanding to build that semantic model to make sure things are calculated the right way, they're discussed the right way in that model and how it's represented, leveraging that AI from like a co-pilot standpoint, like you're not going to get good results from your data because you don't have a good model. It's either not efficient, it's not really what people expect. So I think that's probably the strongest thing, we're trying to just be mindful of as we grow and mature in this, and just make sure we're doing it the right way from the ground up, rather than like jumping full steam into a couple things.
Absolutely. And where do you see the biggest opportunities now for data professionals in these marketing conditions, where suddenly the business started to pay attention on a whole different level, which is a double-edged sword, right? Because now their expectations went up. At the same time, there are budgets now allocated in a favorable way. But at the same time, you need to kind of control the narrative. But where do you see the biggest opportunities in the next, 5 years? I wanted to ask like 5 to 10 years, but it's like impossible to attain that timeline right now. But maybe we can look at 5 years. That's something where, of course, we can't make these predictions, but we can draw some conclusions or ideas based on the past 20 years about what might be the greatest opportunities in the next 5 years from that data visualization, analytics, corporate data service.
That's a great question. I think, prompt engineering, probably, I think everyone will say that in the next 5 years, but, we as a company have been around for 25 plus years of like really good information, and it's probably a little bit shifting away from like, all right, let's re-warehouse all this stuff, let's redo a lake house, let's kind of more from that technical standpoint. And I think the industry is already seeing, and we've had group conversations about this of like, hey, it's a little bit more of a shift away from like really niche skill sets to do these one or two things. Like the need is broadening from your overall understanding of like technical tools. So I see it kind of shifting more where like we hope to get and all that stuff is like really on the solutioning end of how are you leveraging the data we have? Is it, again, I think probably still structured the right way, but really understanding that business process and how information from somebody else can help you in what you're doing and kind of feed off of some of that work. So I think it's really less of like one-off solutions and more of like what's the broader thing that we can do to drive some change.
Absolutely. And then what are you guys, I mean, without disclosing any kind of company secrets, but what are you guys working on that you're excited about and your team is excited about right now?
I mean, we are working on a cloud migration right now to get off on-prem, which is really exciting. It just offers us some different opportunities, still hovering around Databricks or Snowflake, just to kind of leverage those tools more efficiently from the back end standpoint, how people can use them. They still offer those tools around building semantic models and more like quicker app development is what we're kind of excited about. We're moving towards some better CRM tools as well for our sales reps and everybody, just to give more visibility holistically and kind of get out of the silos we might operate in on a regular basis to say like, hey, from our climate control business to our flooring business to whoever is like, hey, let's look at the holistic picture and provide people better data to go drive that change. And then hopefully figure out where if there's, some new markets, leveraging some of that stuff, if there's new markets that we can get into as a company and maybe there's some new business models and things like that.
There you go. And actually for like the final stretch of the conversation, because you have a unique perspective, and this is what I enjoy about these podcasts too, that you guys all have your superpowers, and you might not even be aware of that superpower, which is usually that playbook, that playbook that you use. And I know that a lot of people who are listening with a pen in hand, ready to write down that 1-2 key takeaways that will help them, that they will actually be able to implement in their organization. So if you don't mind, can we do like a recap and maybe add anything that we missed about your playbook specifically, that let's say someone who's been listening understands where you're coming from and they want to achieve similar results, like what would be your executive playbook recommendation for them to consider and then bring into their own organization? And here we can take as long as we need.
I just think first thing that I kind of get out of all this, whether it's the art form and how you communicate, like just be curious, like go ask questions. And again, I think that adds on to that building trust and some of those peer-to-peer relationships. Is don't be afraid to ask questions along the way if you don't understand a business process. I think everybody doesn't want to be that person in the room to raise their hand and be like, what are you guys talking about? Like, ask those questions and don't be afraid to, to really understand those business processes from, the back end standpoint. I think a lot of people, if you're architecture minded, can go and look at the data and understand like, all right, these things are tied together, but like, why are they tied together? Like in practice, how is some of this stuff done? And, continue to build those relationships and have those regular conversations where you can get them with business leaders. I think to add on to that, another good way to do it is just ask to be included in their senior leadership meeting, or say, hey, I just want to sit in. Like, I don't need to be there all the time. Just if you got something interesting coming up, love to sit in and just understand what you guys do and how you talk about it. And then just carrying those conversations over to the data and the reporting is how structure it in a way where you're trying to provide your input and your best practice and your recommendation on certain things, and kind of approach it as like, hey, I'm kind of the professional here on how this is, but like don't get like too technical sometimes with some of that analysis where it gets kind of like over people's heads, right? It's finding that art and that balance on the data and trying to build those business outcomes. And the last bit on like that communication that we talked about is over communicate. Like send an email, like do all those things where like people, if they ignore it, great. If they delete it, that I guess that's okay too. But at least you did it, right? It's it's kind of that same concept of like all they can say is no. They're like just keep over communicating. And I think probably that last kind of like bit of information, and I think I've found that I've been able to do this. Some of those things, like I had a mentor talk to me about this as well, and he was the one who was talking to me about the to earn trust, you have to deliver results. And it's kind of one of those things that like I did kind of instinctually from my experience, and it's kind of a learned behavior. But when you do get those face-to-face meetings, like it doesn't need to feel like it's the drama of a TV show or movie where you're like, I have this big meeting I need to prepare for, and like, what am I going to do? And you're pulling your hair out. And I was trying to approach this as well for this conversation with Laz, is just like it's a peer-to-peer conversation.
Yep.
Like approach that, whether it's the CEO, the CFO. If you have delivered good work, if you built that trust, like you are in that room for a reason, because your opinion is trusted, but B, like it's a peer-to-peer, like just trying to get too technical, but just have a conversation, and like don't be afraid to push back a little bit and say, hey, well, really, if we look at it this way, and just kind of build off of each other to have that conversation. Like just don't walk in with a wall up saying like, hey, I need to get this outcome of it. Kind of approaching is like, look, this was either the first step, and if something good comes out of it, great. If you need to just have another follow-up, like have that follow-up, and then it'll just keep happening.
And then being at ease that way will really help your communication, and also the value that you will deliver that way, because people will have an easier way of receiving the information that you're providing. So I think this is great advice of, do all that preparation. The preparation is actually you having done good work, and then just participate in the meeting, and, whatever naturally and organically comes to you as an opportunity to provide value, well, just, take that opportunity. No, that's great. And look, I was looking forward to this conversation, and we are going to post like your playbook outline after the recording. But we'll put together some cool stuff as per usual, and also some shorter snippets where people can kind of lean into some of these concepts. So we will distribute it on LinkedIn. And so I really enjoyed our conversation, and hope to have you back on the show one day.
Excellent. Great. Yeah, I would love to. And it's a little different conversation than some of the technical stuff and in the strategy, but I think it's a good conversation to have, and, stuff I continue to work on and learn from others as well. So even just talking about it helps, and you kind of get reinvigorated to go and do those other things. And the community's been great for even just bouncing these ideas off of other folks in the field, and just understanding how we can all improve.
Well, appreciate it. And you'll see that this is kind of serendipitous that we had this conversation today. So when we're recording, this is March 11th. Probably we will release the podcast in a month or two. But at the end of this month, we'll have the community group session. And it will be presented by Rebecca Wells, who has been on the podcast before. And it is exactly about what we talked about today. So you guys will have an amazing time. You'll see. Yeah, so absolutely. You said that it was a little bit of a different conversation. It's really on target in terms of what we're focusing on this month specifically. So this was a perfect fit.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Right.
I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, sir. Until next time.